Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Information Playground. I'm Ron Bush. I'm your host. I own Ron Bush Consulting, and we're an information security consulting practice. We help businesses of all size or organizations of all size and industry, risk assessments. There's a whole plethora of things that we offer. Check out my website, ronbushconsulting.com. And if you're interested in expanding your knowledge in the area for your business or your not-for-profit organization, check out my book, Staying Safe in a Very Dangerous World, Think Before You Click. It's available on Amazon. So with that, I want to introduce before I go to our guest, let me also just mention who we're broadcasting from. First off, one of the best radio stations that I know of is a local radio station to Valparaiso, Indiana. They've been around over 15 years, WVLP. That's 103.1 FM. If you're local, if you're streaming or want to stream, go to wvlp.org, and we are broadcast there Monday mornings from 8 to 9 a.m. and Friday afternoons from 1 to 2. You can also catch us on demand on a podcast, just about any podcast platform you can think of, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, doesn't matter. Or you can catch us on YouTube, and the channel for both of those is The Information Playground. So with that, I want to welcome our guest today, Larry Young. He's the owner of Boiling Frog Development. He's also a business development strategist. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And sales training organization, Boiling Frog Development is. And he also is the author of Walk the Sales Plank. We've talked about that in previous shows. He works with small to mid-sized businesses. He's a keynote speaker. He's an all-around great guy. And Larry, welcome.
Hey, Ron, thanks for having me back.
Well, I'm glad you are. We talked about this being the kickoff to a three-part series on our last interview. This is defining the sound of your dream client's voice.
Yeah.
So I've been looking forward to getting into this. This is part one. So I must ask you, what does dream client's voice mean? But before we get there, actually, I mentioned in the introduction, we're going to talk about business development strategist. So define that first, and then let's get to the dream voice.
Yeah. So primarily what I do at Boiling Frog Development is that business development strategist or strategy. And really what I'm doing, the short version is I'm helping individual corporate companies that have some type of strategic plan and a competitive advantage and translating that into high margin revenue growth. So we're taking them through the process. And so the strategic plan, if you break that down a little bit, usually is a business's way of trying to say, here's how I want to be in the market, and here's my strategies for success. And then what we do, Ron, is we peel out what is the competitive advantage. So like in your firm, what is it that you do so well? And we pull that out, and then we ask ourselves and we analyze, do you have the infrastructure? Do you have the team? Do you have the resources to be able to deliver that value? And frankly, ask, do your customers care? And so we start to kind of understand that. And then once that process has been passed, that's when we focus on selecting the right sales strategy, whether that's social, whether that's face-to-face, and then what method we're going to use, which I think we'll probably end up talking about sometime today, and then building that sales process so that they're able to do that. But at the end, the organization like yours or many others get a full stream of strategy that reaches that dream client's voice. And that's what we're doing.
So we mentioned the dream client's voice.
Yeah.
How do we define that? How do we determine what that is?
Yeah, so that's a lot to it. So the dream client voice, the idea is that really what you're doing is you're looking out to see what is important to those individuals and that those from the people that you're selling to. So all too often, Ron, what ends up happening is when I start consulting with businesses, what you think you do well and what you think your competitive advantage maybe is something that your dream client doesn't care about. I mean, they may care, but it maybe isn't the differentiator. So when I talked about strategic planning, a lot of that competitive advantage is finding out what is it that my firm delivers to my clients that is so different than what my competitors do, and what am I so good at? And finding that dream client voice is either a matter of leading into the market and finding people that care about that, or finding your dream client and finding out what's important to them and delivering it. You can go at it one or two different ways.
I love what you just said. It brought to mind, and I can't bring up the book. I read it in earlier this year, but one of the books was talking, it might have been the answer, asking the right question or something like that. It might have been that book. Febreze was the example he used.
Okay.
Febreze was a new company. At the time they were a new company. Nobody knew who they were. They tried launching and doing commercials because they were just acting in their commercials like they were just another company that put a nice scent in the air. When actually Febreze is kind of like an odor reader. And so they went to housewives and actually videoed housewives that bought and used their product, and to find out what is it that makes us different? What is it that differentiates us? And so the housewives that responded was, I use Febreze after I've cleaned the house. And it's a treat for me because now everything smells fresh and clean because it's eaten up those stale odors.
Right.
And the more that they listen to their customer, the more they realize, gosh, we're looking at this all wrong. We're not just another scent that people throw in the air. We're something that actually cleans the air. And so that's when their marketing changed, and that's when their growth pattern changed.
Right.
So what differentiates, when you're talking to your clients, what differentiates them from everyone else? How do you get there?
Yeah. Well, part of where it starts, again, is kind of that strategic planning. And so then this is kind of to define who we are. And then the competitive advantage or the competitive analysis is kind of the ability to help an organization look at their industry, look at the players, look at what their customer needs are, and then kind of find out where they're different. So one of the things that you really have to focus on in the competitive analysis piece is coming up with then a business development strategy that, one, you'll hear me say hundreds of times, that your client cares about, but two, it is about them and their experience and either how they use your product or service. So I'll give you a really good example. This just happened not all that long ago. So in the Phoenix area, I was speaking to a small community college that had kind of a business program, and I was talking to them a little bit about strategy. And one of the things that they said is, well, we want to become the #1 business school in kind of that community school, if you will, in the Phoenix area. And my question for them is, well, what does #1 mean? Like, what does that really mean? #1 in what? I mean, how do you define that? Is it #1 in the enrollment of students? Is it the #1 in how you're reviewed in Forbes or whatever publication is? What does that really mean? So a lot of times, Ron, what you start off when you start this whole business development strategy is to really find out, have you really made it specific enough? I mean, what is #1? You hear this with banks all the time. We want to have #1 in market share, or we want to be the best run company. And so this college was too general. And so those are more just goals. They're not strategies, right? They're not something that the end user feels. So now extrapolate that out. And just 3-4 weeks ago, my son, my 17-year-old, he's a senior in high school. He's going off to college. And now Zach, he's going to be an engineer. And so obviously I have to find a school that has an engineering program. He's not after a liberal arts degree, he's after a Bachelor of Science in mechanical or automotive engineering. So we're doing, Ron, as you can imagine, we're doing the tour of all the schools, and all the schools are trying to sell us on Zach staying there for maybe 5 years. And so we've gone to big schools, we've gone to small ones, we've gone to medium size. And we end up at this college, and it's an engineering school. They've got the things that they need. Now, the conversation that they have with Zach is really around, here's what your experience would look like, here's what dorm life would look like, and all of that. Now that part right there is no different than any other college tour. In fact, we got another one tomorrow. I know that's going to be their pitch. But what they said to Zach is they said, look, we want to be clear that if you go to school here, we have a 98% placement rate, and the average student makes $68,000 a year right out of school. I don't know about you, Ron, but that perked Dad's ears up, right? He can pay for his student loans, right? And so anyways, so he's off doing something with the students and kind of that type of thing. And I had a chance, just happened to have a chance to be with some of their leadership and some of the professors of that. And we're into this conversation. We're talking about that. And I said to him, you know, this is a strategist mind. I said, how did you get there? Right? There's tons of engineering schools, but how did you get to 68,000 and 98% placement? And what they said was, they said, we started this years ago. And what we did is we realized that our goal was to give students a great job out of college, because what we knew is great jobs create great alumni, which create great foundations. So it's part of a bigger plan. I said, but how did you do it? Right? It's nice that you want to do it. How did you do it? And they said that we partnered. What we did is we went out to dream employers, places that our students would want to work, you know, whether it be like Tesla or Ford or whoever that would be. And we asked them, what do you want from engineers today? Like, what do you want them to know the day they step on there? And so they developed curriculum, Ron, to meet the needs of those great employers that paid well. So say they're connecting their strategy with their task. And then in turn, those employers said, look, and what we'll do is we'll help you teach your curriculum. So if my son is a sophomore and they're going through these 3 classes, we'll make sure that we kind of cover that while they're on the job. So there's this collaboration together, if you follow me.
Right.
And at the end of the day, they connected something that was important for my son, that was value. And now their sales team, which is kind of their admissions and things of that nature, and their marketing department have something to go out, and it's a competitive advantage over all the other schools that I've seen. So you can imagine now when I go visit other schools, it practically ruined it for me, at least for me anyways.
Right.
I mean, he'll make the decision, but I'm sitting there going, well, do you guys do this? Right. You know, and they're like, well, no. And it's like, okay. And again, he'll make the decision, but that is a great story of 2 businesses that do virtually the same thing. One has a very general strategy and the other is really strategic about their business development and their competitive advantage.
So I was taking notes, and you'll often see me look down, and what I'm doing is that you've said something that sparks an idea and I'm writing notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it sounds like the first question you ask is, what do you want to be? What is it that you want? In this particular school's case, they wanted to be one of the top placement schools, and they wanted their graduates to be top in salary.
That's right.
Sounds like that's what they came up with. Mm-hmm. Now they could have said, well, we want to be the best school. We want to be the best engineering school.
That's right.
At that point, your second question would come into play. Well, what does that mean?
That's right.
What was the first example you gave? It was
so the first college, it was the same setup. But they were just, we were talking more about the business school, and they said to me, our strategic plan is that we want to be the #1 business school in the Phoenix, metro area. And so then the question I asked, which all of us should ask ourselves, is okay, what does #1 mean?
Yeah.
Like, is 1 or not 1 a point in time? Is it a #1 overall? Is it, what does that mean? And so one of the things that I give your listeners, and I would do this to anybody, is as I'll challenge a business in this regard, is I use what I've just fondly named the toddler questioning, which is, when kids are little, it's always why, and how. And so you kind of do the same way. If you say, well, I want to be the #1 cybersecurity company in North America, well, why? And so what ends up happening is when you kind of go down through that, what this college decided, the second college decided is, look, we want to have good alumni. So then good alumni brings resources to continually get better, expand, and grow. And so then the question becomes, how do I get better alumni? Well, in their opinion, was I get better alumni through having better students have better jobs right out of the gate. They're a step ahead of everybody. Okay.
Yeah.
It seems obvious now in hindsight, but they had to come up with this through that process. And now they're wildly successful in the world that they play in.
You haven't gone through that exercise. It's easy when you look back, like a lot of things in life.
Mhm.
It's,
Yeah.
when you're looking forward, it's uncertain and you haven't been there yet. Once you've gotten there and you've nailed down all the different things that matter, yeah, you look back and, oh gosh, that's obvious. Well, it
Yeah.
wasn't obvious before. It is obvious now. Everybody wants to be number one.
That's right.
So differentiation. Are those the only two questions that you look at? What do you want to be? Is that just a starting point? Where do we go from there?
Yeah, that is literally just a starting point. What really those things about what do you want to be and why is that important, Ron, is really to kind of break old tendencies, and to kind of break the pattern of thinking that entrepreneurs or business owners are doing. That's what I'm trying to do. I always have a knack for it, but just kind of jarring that thought to where, wait a minute, why are we really thinking that way? Because we were taught, if some of us played sports or whatever it was in high school or college for you, we were always taught be number one, right? And we love to have these cool sayings on our wall. Of course, my wall's blank and white here, but these motivational type. But the reality is, being number one there is not really quantifiable. What a business's goal should be, and where I really try to take them, is what you want to be able to do is be able to provide a service or a niche for your clients that help you to become the most profitable in your industry. Being the most profitable in your industry as a business is not an unhealthy thing. It's a very aspiring goal, because then with that you can create jobs and you can create charity and you can survive through tough times. There's a lot of good things that come from it. So rather than be number one, why don't you just be either a very profitable player within the industry that provides value for a client? That's a goal.
And I think that's what makes the difference. If, there's an old saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you.
Yeah.
You also don't know when you've arrived if you don't know
Yeah.
where you're going. I had a teacher early on in a company I worked for. This is probably 30 years ago. But the man was a master at keeping focus. He always knew what his critical numbers were. That's way back in the day. There was some book on critical numbers. I've long forgotten what that was. But he knew it. He always knew what the critical numbers was. He knew what he was going to. You ever watch Big Bang Theory, Sheldon on there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sheldon knows when he's going to go to the bathroom. He knows when he's going to eat. He knows when he's going to have a drink. He knows everything because he plots it out. This guy was almost there.
Yeah.
But the beauty of that is he knew exactly what he wanted to accomplish. He knew what he wanted his business to look like. He knew every aspect of it. He had done the hard work. And that was, I can't tell you how helpful that's been to me over the years. Different businesses I've owned, different places I've worked, always keeping the focus on who you are and who you want to be. If you haven't made that yet, once you've differentiated, to use your term, once you've decided who it is that you want everybody to say, and there's different ways. Gosh, as I'm saying this, I think of all different things I've read. There's the book that says, what do you want people to say about you at your funeral? Well, that's just another way of that. That's keeping focus. What do I want people to know who I am? A little more positive than that. It's my business. Who do I want people to say my business is? Do I want clients to say this? Do I want competitors to say that? Do I want people in the marketplace? I don't use Ron Bush Consulting, but I've heard of him, and so far I've heard he's this, that, or that.
Yeah.
That's what I think you want to accomplish, and I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, because that's the perception. What I don't want to confuse is, I use the word like differentiated, but I also use that a little bit synonymous with the idea of competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. So what is it that your firm does, or what is it that my firm does, or whomever it is, that delivers value to a client in a differentiated and more meaningful way? Yeah. You can have plenty of cybersecurity companies. You can have plenty of business development strategists. But at the end of the day, what is it? What's your secret sauce? What is it that you do different? And that's what a business has to answer through that process. I have to answer it in my own business. What is it that I do so different, than others, and that type of thing. And then you take that and test that in the market, and you find out what the premium is that you can offer it, and you find the sound of your dream client's voice, and you stand in the middle of them and tell them what your advantage is. That's what this is all about.
So the sound of your dream client's voice is up here. Is your dream client saying, in my case, yeah, Ron Bush Consulting does this for me, that for me, that for me, and that's what I want. Is that where we're
Yeah,
going?
I mean, think about it in simplistic terms. You and I, where we sell B2B, right? We sell to businesses. We don't sell a product or service. We sell a solution to a problem. And so if your competitive advantage is that you solve a bigger problem or have a better mousetrap than the other guy or gal, then that's what you go to market with. And the issue that I see in most businesses is that they're disconnected from what their overall strategic plan is. And they're broken apart in sales. It's almost like a right hand, left hand. And so sales is not really out there able to really understand, well, what is my competitive advantage? And it doesn't align. Most of what I do, Ron, is I fix the brokenness between the strategy and the sales team, the people that are out pushing it. Or for you as an entrepreneur, you're a solopreneur, you're doing it yourself. And that's usually broken. You have to be able to tell somebody what it is that you do so different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've talked in the past about competitive strategy. You brought it up quite a bit already. What can you add to that? Let's talk about that. Competitive strategy seems straightforward. I want to be better than my competitors in this way. Is there more to it than that?
Yeah, I mean, there is. I mean, so I'll the way to kind of outline this a little bit, if we had a visual, is that when you're the sound of your dream client's voice, and what I do is after you've decided, you've done your strategic plan, and now we've cornered out the competitive advantage. What you're really doing, Ron, is three things, and maybe I can try to put this together and get it to you for your listeners. But you're really looking at three different, I call them the three bubbles, and I need to come up with something cooler than bubbles, but nevertheless, it's what I got today. But in the first bubble, what you're doing is you're trying to find the sound of your dream client's voice, which is what we're talking about today. And that is a value type play. And so what you're doing is you're going out to your clients, and do you have a process to understand what is important to them? Do you have the ability to deliver on those things? And do you understand the piece and have the infrastructure to be able to handle that? So a good example of dream client's voice is really the idea of, think about Southwest Airlines. Years and years ago, in a highly fragmented industry, they were able to come in and they said, what do our customers want? Well, they don't want change fees, and they want better service, and they want cheaper airlines. And Southwest built a model and a strategy to deliver that. So they listen to the sound of their dream client's voice. Dream client doesn't always have to be big and grandeur. It just has to be, where can I hit the market? And that's what they did. Now, today, that doesn't seem as unique because they've changed the industry, and the industry has tried to evolve to follow them, okay? So the first bubble is finding the sound of your dream client's voice. The second is finding the sound of your voice. So you may have a competitive strategy that is really around your voice. And what that is now you're going to market with, you're serving a need that defines a market. So you're the one that's going out and saying, hey, this is what I stand for, and I'm going to find the customers that care about it. So you can see the difference between the two. One is I've identified a dream client, and now I'm going to find out what's important to them. And there's a whole process to be able to build that business development in there. In this one, it's more about, I'm great at this. This is what I'm going to stand for. If you like me, you'll do business with me. If you don't, you won't. So a really good example of that might be Tesla. I'm using bigger names that we would know, but they're a little more concrete for smaller businesses. But think about Tesla. I mean, they came out and said, we're going to build an electric car. It's going to be expensive. It's going to have all the bells and whistles. This is initially, and this is what we're going to stand for. But their goal was to become the greatest and biggest car company in the world.
Yeah.
But they started out from that side. Now, if you went to Elon Musk and said, hey, look, there's a lot of money in building gas guzzling semis. What do you think about that? What do you think he would tell you, Ron? He'd probably tell you no, right? He'd probably say, no, this is who we are. Right. Think about another great example that takes down a giant would be like when Netflix first came out. You remember in the 80s, 90s, right? The Friday, Saturday rush to the Blockbuster or whatnot. Right. And who'd have thought that would ever change? And Netflix comes in and says, we're more interested in a subscription service, so we're just going to go to market. They didn't try to build brick and mortar, and they didn't try to copy Blockbuster's model. They went to it. And when you do that, it has a whole different business development strategy to it because you got to prove things. Mm-hmm. And then the last bubble, the third bubble is the easiest one to explain, Ron, and that's usually like your cost leadership. That means that you as an organization are just going to be the least expensive out of everybody, and you have to drive those costs. And that's where the conversation with business owners, long answer, goes to start to separate. Now, where do we go from here?
Now, there's a couple of things. I've got to say, you remind me of the airline industry as you're talking through this. Pan Am was the leader back in the day. They used stars. They had the guy Lindbergh. They had Lindbergh as one of their spokespeople. They had Hollywood people. They were just the thing back when airline travel was new. They owned the skies at a time when nobody else was even there. They were disruptors. They got contracts with the U.S. Mail Service and they started just all kinds of things that nobody thought of. But then the market changed and they didn't. American Airlines came along with Sabre. I don't know if you remember it or not, but Sabre used to be the way before all this stuff was, things are the way it is now where you go into each airline and you book your flight. Sabre was the beginning of that. And what it allowed American to do was collect information on their travelers. So now they knew you flew, they knew you wanted to go here or there. They knew all kinds of things about you just by collecting what you told them. Yeah. That brought in, you were exactly right. You mentioned Southwest. That brought in Southwest at a later date who already would do all that, but they defined who they were. And again, the market had changed. We find that another example comes to mind, Polaroid. So Kodak owned the world of camera. They didn't, when Polaroid, what's this guy's name, Land, when Edwin Land maybe?
Right.
When he developed the science to develop pictures in front of you, he went to Kodak before he started stuff, before he started his own business, and they weren't interested. They said, no, we make money on the film. It's the old Gillette marketing scheme. Gillette developed it. I'll sell you the razor cheap. I'm going to make money on, or the razor itself. I'm going to make money on the blades. And that's what Kodak had going for it. Well, what Polaroid did, or Land developed at Polaroid, is he developed a system where you could have it immediately. You didn't have to take it to be processed. You didn't have to wait on that. So he kind of changed the market and it moved. Later on, he came up with digital photography, but the entry into it was $2,500 for a camera.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to pay that for a camera. You could buy a Polaroid, I don't remember, but probably $50, maybe $100. You could get a camera cheap, and the film wasn't that bad. So if you went that way, he didn't turn when the market turned. He developed a way that the market didn't want to go. So when you find the sound of your voice, it strikes me, the common wisdom in a lot of businesses is just keep adding products and services. If this isn't selling, go find something else. Sell that, sell that, sell that. Pretty soon you've got your products and services so huge, you don't know who you are anymore.
That's right.
You've forgotten who your focus is or what your focus is.
When you think about it, Ron, you're absolutely right. Some of these big company examples that we use, you could almost get kind of confused. I use those examples because we can identify with those. But when you're in the small, to medium-sized business, the
Mhm.
striking difference between those between those bubbles is very striking, is a better
Yeah.
way to say it. So you have to really decide, even for like you, are you going to the market with the sound of your voice, meaning you've got something that's new, nobody else has it, you're ahead of the curve, you're disrupting the industry a little bit, and you're going to go to it. And the business development strategy with that is totally different, right?
Right.
Or it's the sound of your dream client's voice, which is kind of what we're focusing in on today, which is the fact that I need to understand my target market first. What do they care about? Then can I deliver that? And then if I believe that I can, then how do I build the infrastructure, the sales team, and the process to be able to deliver that? And of course, as I said, the third is kind of the cost piece, which is easier to understand.
Is it, when you're trying to get there, is it about what your prospects and customers want, or more than that? Where do we go? Yes, your customers may want this, but maybe that isn't the right thing, or maybe that isn't in your wheelhouse. Or is it something more? I guess let's run with that for a minute. What do we look at? Let's nail that down a little more. I've got clients that they want me to do everything under the sun, but I don't. And a lot of the time they don't want to pay for that. They just want it as an added benefit. So what I do is I sit back and I say, I know a company over here that specializes in that might be somewhere you want to go. I do have a lot of products and services, but I keep it coherent and I keep it integrated. There's nothing out here. I don't do pen testing for instance. I hire people to do pen testing for me. That's an industry penetration test for those that aren't familiar with the lingo. So every business ought to have penetration done at least on an annual basis, and depending on size and industry, maybe more often than that. It allows what's called a white hat hacker to try to break in to your network.
Okay.
If he can do it, now he's discovered the vulnerabilities. Now you know where to patch. This isn't wishing we were secure. It's actually finding how a black hat hacker would break in. So I don't do that. It changes every day. You got a zillion operating systems to keep up with. You got a zillion different things, and all of it changes daily. I got too many other things to keep up with. I hire people that's all they do.
Right.
So
right. Yeah.
while should I offer that? Well, I do, but I do through a strategic partner, because you can't know everything. Nobody knows everything. And in technology, it's getting increasingly harder to, because just to keep up with it. What you knew yesterday probably isn't true today.
Yeah,
So
true.
So,
Well, to your question, what you were asking, so how do you know, some of the pitfalls, Ron, when you think about it, is that companies a lot of times think that they're one and they're really another. But where they really break down is the fact that if they think they're one and it's broken through the process. So to answer kind of your question, if you say I'm going with the sound of my dream client's voice, and which means that I'm going to go out to that target and I'm going to find out what's important to them. And then as I've said a few times, you got to kind of back and say, can I not only produce that, whether it's in your shop or production area, or for us, do we have that skill set? And then can we deliver that to them? So there's times where you're going to go out and you're going to go to that dream client, you've identified them, but maybe you find out that particular dream client asks for something you can't do.
right.
Maybe they say to you, look, I want to be able to implement cybersecurity policies and never touch them again, never have to update them. I just want to be protected forever. It's probably a goofy example for you, but you would look
I
at
tell
them.
them it can't happen. This side
Yeah,
of heaven,
it just can't happen. And so they'll say, well, I'll go find somebody that will. And so then off their day. So you have dream clients, when you're looking for the sound of their voice, the big question you have to backfill through your strategic planning and the competitive analysis is, can I actually deliver that?
Yeah.
If you think about it. And that's where you were asking about, could it be broken down? Is it simple as that? Yeah, I can break down as simple as that.
I'm going to have to stop us for just a moment.
Okay.
We're going to do some station identification, little identification of us, and we will be right back. Hi, this is Ron Bush. We're back with Larry Young for part 2 of Finding Your Dream Client's Voice. Now, I encourage you, if you didn't hear part 1, go back and listen to that first. Again, if you're listening this on WVLP, then what you can do is catch, if this is a Monday you're listening to it, they'll replay it on Friday. And if you're listening to it on demand, well, you'll obviously be able to find part 1 and part 2 on any of the podcast platforms and any of the, on YouTube, all under the Information Playground. I'm Ron Bush. Just to remind you of Ron Bush Consulting, we underwrite the program. The Information Playground is dedicated to educating people primarily in technology and business, just general things. We talk to leaders that often have published books, but sometimes we just talk to leaders who have not. In our case today, we have Larry Young. Larry Young is a business development strategist. He's written a book called Walking the Sales Plank. He's also an entrepreneur. He's got Boiling Frog is his company, and he's a keynote speaker. He just does everything. If you're looking for a consultant to help you devise the business strategy you're looking for, I recommend Larry. Larry, let's pick up where we left off.
Yeah.
In the first in part 1, in the first part. I'm going to have to put you on the spot. What differentiates you from other strategists?
Okay, so you're trying to see whether I walk the talk is what you're
right.
after. No, that's fair. That's fair. So there's 2 things that I identify that are strong and that are different. The first is, and we talked about this a lot last time, connecting the strategic plan all the way to the sales process, and making sure that there's no broken pieces. So you have a lot of players in this industry that will maybe just focus on the back end, like the sales training piece. Or, of course, you've got a lot of people who focus on strategic planning, but there's not a lot of people that do the connective resource between the both of those. And that's the first thing. The second thing, which is probably the primary thing I should have mentioned first, is that when we get down to the end, this is something that very few people do, and I'm a big proponent of this. When you get down to the end and you're selecting the sales strategy, what I do is I look at it from the mind of the decision maker, from the person that you are selling to. What are their motivation? What is their infrastructure? How do they make decisions, of your dream client? What motivates them to go one way or another, and how do they analyze these things? And I backfill that when we select the strategy so that we're meeting what they need. What makes this so different and so powerful, and why the results are so strong, is because when you look at businesses all the way from, let's say, like a mom and pop, all the way to maybe like a middle market company, they act and behave different. They make decisions that are totally different. A small mom and pop is different than somebody that has a full-blown procurement or purchasing department, and you're the person selling to them. And so being able to select a strategy depending on which one of those are your dream client or a multiple phase, that's why I'm so different. Most people don't look at the mind of the decision maker. And in fact, Ron, if you go out to like research, to the research scholars that look, there's a ton of articles on sales. There's tons on value. There's tons on, obviously, strategic planning and those types of things. But there's very little. I would bet, Ron, there's less than maybe 50 to 60 articles on the buyer side of it, the mind side. And that's where I play.
That's excellent. Now you're going to gain all that insight in interviewing the client and doing,
Right.
You wouldn't call it a risk assessment. That's what I do. But when you go in and develop your strategy, you're obviously asking questions. So you get to know your client very well. That's how you recognize his voice or her voice. But it's also how you know to structure the advice
That's right.
that you give them back. Excellent. When I started consulting, I read a book by Alan Weiss, The $1 Million Consultant, or something like that. It's a few years since I read it. And he basically gives that advice. Don't just walk in and cookie cutter the advice you're going to give. Uh, do a thorough risk assessment. He didn't call it that, but do a thorough evaluation of where your client is and what they actually need and what fits in with their culture. That's that's vital to it. So in my case, you can't, if I tell people they've got to stop doing some sort of behavior, in fact, that's the hardest part of my job. Anybody can come along and use tools that tighten up the security on a network. That's not where most hacks occur. Most data breaches occur due to human error.
Yeah.
90% of them are social engineering, whether it's cute puppies and a spam, or it's something else that you clicked on. That's how most ransomware gets delivered. That's how most malware gets installed.
Yeah.
And that's also how people gain access to the system without using any of that. They pick up the phone and they say, I'm the IT department in a larger corporation. I'm the IT department, and we understand that you've got a problem with this. Oh, and of course, the employee says, no, I don't. Well, can you do such and such? Well, they wouldn't be able to.
That's right.
Or they create some sort of scenario that's called pretexting. And so that's how most hackers get in, either through the email using social engineering or via the phone or even text nowadays.
Yeah.
And sometimes in person. It's easy to walk into any kind of an office. If there's a receptionist there, there's a zillion ways to get by her or him. You can ask them about a restroom or something. There's all kinds of scenarios. I used to use this in training, where you walk in. I would walk in with a little girl claiming she's my daughter, and she needs to go to the restroom. Well, the lady is going to, or I'm her uncle. And so the lady's going to get up and take her to the restroom for her. Well, I just take out my USB that has a keylogger on it. I need 20 seconds to download that to her computer, and I'm in. I now own the network. She's gone out of her way to do something nice. Or I say I've got a job interview 10 minutes down the street, and I had a dog or a child run out in front of me. I spilled coffee all over the resumes. Would you mind please just printing off one resume for me? I really need this job. And I can lay it on thick. I'm going to be evicted, or I'm going to be foreclosed on, or I'm going to lose my car, whatever the case might be. And of course, anybody with a heart's going to say, sure, I'll print off one resume for you. As soon as she puts that in, my resume will come up, but it's installing some sort of malware, probably a keylogger, but it could be just about anything really.
Yeah.
And I own the network. So these kind of things most businesses don't know. I've got to get them to change their behavior. And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. So that's what you're doing. And you think, Ron, in your world, or any of your listeners' world, the reason why I'm a proponent of understanding the mind of the decision maker is because just logically, you call on all sorts of sizes of business. So if you call on a mom and pop, you're dealing with, mom or pop, right?
Yeah.
If you're dealing with a larger company that has, like I said, a procurement area, the statistics show that it's 6.8 people to make a decision today for something that's complex, like an overall cybersecurity. So you have to be able to understand the mindset of those people and how they want to be sold to, rather than, as you can see, we were talking last time and even now, if you have a strategic plan and I want to grow here and I want to grow my cybersecurity business, and this is the platform or the product that I want to kind of go with, you can't just use the same solution for both.
That's right.
And so understanding the mind of the decision maker has been my primary quest over the last 20 years.
Yeah. That's excellent. Excellent. Off air, we'd talked, and you'd brought up competitive strategy, and you did in part one as well, and how it relates or ties to sales. Tell the listeners a little more about this.
Yeah. So now let's talk kind of like you've gone through the process. Originally last time we had talked about, competitive strategy and, hey, I want to be number one. And, that's not a strategy. That's a hope or a goal and whatnot. But let's say that you've gotten through that piece. And again, we've oversimplified it here for timing. But now the disconnect is between what the company strategy is and the sales. This is where I seem broken, and this is where I fill in that gap. So I'll give you a really, really good example. This just happened just a couple of weeks ago. So I met with a young lady. She worked for an architecture firm, and I was looking at doing just some individual sales coaching. So that's part of what I'll do in the right circumstances. And so I met with her, and of course I mean, this girl is wickedly smart. She's talented. She knows sales. She can get along with people, and she's very well connected. So it would be a lady that any organization would love to have. And her story for working for that firm, I mean, you can tell that she just bleeds the colors of that firm. So just to set it up, you understand that she has all the makings, but she's not as successful as she would hope to be. And so I started the question off with, well, where do you kind of see the struggle is? Now, keep in mind, I'm dealing with her as an individual, not the people that own the business, right? So I'm trying to kind of figure out, is there a disconnect there in a professional manner? And so I asked her the question. I said, well, what is it that you struggle with? And she's like, well, I just don't seem to be closing the sales that I need to close, right? And I said, all right, well, let's back this up. I said, first of all, do you know who your dream client is? Like, if I told you, like, name off 5 people that are your dream client in town, could you do that? And she did. So not only, Ron, does she have the ability, but she's identified her dream client. So she's already a step ahead of a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, well then, do you think that you could get meetings with these individuals? She said, easy, I could. They would meet with me. They know me. They respect me. So you can see where I'm going with this. I'm starting in the fact that I'm trying to find out, is this kind of a sales skill issue, or is it what we're kind of talking about in these podcasts? And so the question I asked her is, I said, what is your competitive advantage? When you think about your firm, you represent your firm, you have all the skills, you can get meetings with these people. So you've had meetings with these people, and what is your advantage? And so she goes on kind of this long spiel about something or another. And I let her go for a while. And I said, okay, let's back up. This is your advantage. You've got the skills, I can tell. You have the ability to meet with the customers, right? Or your prospective customers, and you know what your competitive advantage is. Why is it that you're not getting the sales you want then? I mean, right? And she's like, I don't know. We sat there for a little while, let her stew on it. I said, maybe the problem is that those dream clients don't care. They don't care about what you think your competitive advantage is. And she stopped, and it really made her think about it, because she had all the, when you think about a business development strategy and all the way to the salespeople, check, 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 right? So here's a girl that's fully talented. She's got all the connections. She can get appointments with the right people, which is probably one of the harder things to do in the process. And I'm not saying she's in trouble by any means, but this is the problem. And this is kind of my quest, is that a lot of times what you'll see is that who gets blamed for lack of sales performance? The salesperson. And then eventually the sales manager, right? But the reality is there's a disconnect between what is valuable, right? What value can that firm offer? And she had really no clue. And so how do you send out your salespeople or yourself, or you yourself, when you really don't know what your advantage is?
Right.
And so what do? We roll through salespeople. The average turnover on sales professional now is like 45%. And we just roll through people, throwing enough against the wall, hoping somebody's going to sell our stuff. And the reality, we in the leadership piece of it have let our people down. And so what I told her to do, which cements what we talked about in part 1 and thus so far, is I said, here's your assignment. I want you to go get an appointment with those 5 people. This is your assignment. And I want you to sit down with them and say, what are the 1, 2, or 3 most important things that you use when you make a decision on which architecture firm that you're going to choose? Just tell me. And if they say something like, well, price is important. Okay, price is great. I understand that we've got to be competitive, but outside of that, what's the next thing? Okay, and outside of that, what's the next thing? And so a lot of times, Ron, one of the techniques you can use in your firm and all your listeners can, I did this with my bankers and sales staff for years, is I would always say, what's the number one thing that you need to make a decision that would push you over towards coming and banking with me? Just simple, just a straightforward question. They'd be like, oh, we want you, everybody would always say, well, we want a low rate, right? Okay, but I know that my business model and my strategy is not to be the low cost provider. I didn't choose that bubble, right? So I can't go there. And so I'd say, all right, well, understand that we'll always try to be competitive, but what is the one thing that is important to you that would fully outweigh price? That if I did so good that price wouldn't hardly even matter. What is that? And you make them answer. I told her, I said, you make them answer that, because she had the relationship with them. Because now when you build a proposal and a sales strategy or a value-based sales strategy, now, Ron, you have the ability to go out and say, all right, boom, this is what you told me. This is what's important to me, right? These are important to you. So this is the sound of your dream client's voice. You're just asking them, tell me what you want from us.
Right.
We'll be competitive and go from there. And she lit up with excitement. She's working on the assignment right now.
Once again, you said this in part one, it sounds so obvious. And as we both echoed, it is, when you know the answer, it is obvious, but it's so hard for us to get there sometimes. You've mentioned several different ways. Is there one of the ways better or worse to get where we're talking?
No, so when you're referencing, the bubbles, no, there's not a better way. It's just that you need to choose a way. And so the leadership team, whether that's you by yourself or if a listener is here with an executive team, what do we want to do? Like, okay, let's say that you're in banking, and I don't have something that's prolific in changing the world of banking, as an example. And so, all right, so we've got to go with the sound of our dream client's voice. The point of it is to choose, and that you really have to make sure that you choose. I'll give you a really good story. And this happened just 3 weeks ago. So I'm meeting with a family-owned bank, and this is not uncommon to meet with the owners, the existing family, and then the C-level. And we're all sitting around and we're talking about this. So this story will sum up kind of what we've talked about so far. And I said, well, what is it that's your competitive advantage? Because I knew banking is very commoditized, right? Everybody has kind of the same thing. And so this family went down. I think it was the mom. She said, we're a 5-generation bank, family-owned bank. We got great customer service. People love working for us. We started out lending to teachers, and blah, and this and whatnot. And we're really proud of what we do in the community and stuff. And you could see it, Ron. It was the coolest story you've ever heard, to just sit and see the passion. What was even cooler is that the C-suite people that were sitting in, you could see them nodding, and you could see them, yes. I mean, these people were buying into it, which told me that probably the next few levels and even down to all levels, this idea probably permeated through the organization, right? And so then I asked him, I told you I was the king of asking those questions, those uncomfortable questions. And I said, that is really the coolest story I've ever heard. But my question is, outside of your organization, who cares? Like, who really cares? And of course, that's it. You almost, on the side, you almost hear the sound of the contract being ripped up on, right? Right. And I said, well, hold on now. So I'm not saying that it's not important to deliver those things. And that story is a great story. But in town here, there's 48 other banks. And I can name 7 of them very quickly that are family owned, been around for 100 years, pride themselves on customer service, are philanthropic in the community, and they do all those hire great people. So the question isn't whether they care then, the question is, what are you doing that's so different? Or are you just going to stand at the same trough, if you will, with them, with those 7 others saying the same thing that they are?
Right.
See, the problem, Ron, with all of this disconnect is the fact that you can build a strategy, you know, for your business and even for mine and the biggest of businesses. And you can say, this is what my competitive advantage is. But the problem that most businesses face is that the competitive advantage that they think is competitive is not competitive.
Right.
Everybody else is out doing it. I see it in banking all the time. In cybersecurity, I'll bet it's the same kind of thing. People are kind of saying the same thing. And so none of this works until you find out what it is that you do so different than everyone else. And so that's where the challenge for them was, is they had to get, you asked earlier, what are the questions? There's hundreds of questions you could ask, but the idea is to unlodge the way we've always thought. You know, oh, I'm great at customer service. People are just going to come to me. Do customers care about customer service? Of course they do. But is your competition out there saying, well, we're second best. We're not as good as Ron. We're second best. No, they're not out there saying that. So you're not doing anything to differentiate yourself. And that's why you have to align that strategy.
I love that illustration.
Yeah.
The record storage company, a different company that I owned years back, we had the advantage of being the mom and pop, and everyone knew the big kids on the block, but they didn't know us. And that was my entryway. You get lost in the big, you know, sky full of stars, I won't lose you.
Yeah.
You're important to me.
Yeah.
And that was my entryway. That was what set me apart, because I only had big kids against me. I didn't have any competition from other mom and pops.
Yeah.
It had been different if there were 5 of us in town, or in that story, 48 of us.
Yeah.
That would have been really hard.
Right.
But that was my competitive advantage. And the clients that I had, you know, I met with them annually, or sometimes more often than that, but we'd sit down, I'd take them to lunch. So what are we doing that you like? What are we doing that you don't like? Are there any problems, anything I'm unaware of? I'm pretty hands-on, so I usually knew, and I'd usually handled anything. And then the final question was, what can we do better was part of that. But the final question was, what can we do that we're not doing now?
Yeah.
And then I uncovered all kinds of things that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And,
Right.
and that's what it takes. I did it through, you know, as a little fish in a little pond. So I was able to sit down and say things like that face to face. All of my clients, I knew I was on a first name basis. So it was easy to do that. Now today, you know, I've got to do that through Zoom, and it's not quite as comfortable to sit down and go through that. I mean, it's easy.
Yeah.
But I like the breaking bread together and all that stuff. I miss that.
Yeah.
So we're about to run out of time.
Okay.
I want to give you the last word. We're going to pick up where we left off in part 3 of this.
Okay.
Is there anything that we've got, like 60 seconds, 75 seconds, any final words to say?
Yeah, I think the thing that I want to remind your listeners is just think about that last story. I mean, there's a lot of things we could talk about, but 80 to 90% of the businesses that I go in to, Ron, have that bank mentality, that story.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you press their staff and you press the leadership and you say, well, what is the real competitive advantage? And when you go through that process that I take them through, that's what you go out to your clients with. And that's when your salespeople and your marketing and everything is aligned. And here's what we stand for. And I think that's what makes it easier, because the reality is you have to, just like the lady that I was coaching, you have to give her something to go out and say, look, big, you know, target group, this is what we stand for. This is what we do better or deliver better than anyone else. And if they like that, you deliver on that and you keep getting better at that every day that you're in existence, and you'll dominate. You'll be the most profitable in your industry.
Excellent. Excellent. We're going to have to close it for now, folks. I want to thank Larry for being with us today. Larry Young, Boiling Frog. How do people reach you? Give us the website, Larry.
Yeah, easy. BoilingFrogDevelopment.com. You can go there and check out some downloadable resources and some things from that, some blogs, some other videos. You can also reach me through boilingfrogdevelopment@gmail.com, or you can check me out on Facebook at my Boiling Frog Development Facebook page. You can message me there, LinkedIn under Larry Young. Those are all ways that I get messages from people and then kind of respond back and see how this fits for someone's organization.
Excellent. I'm Ron Bush with Ron Bush Consulting. You've been listening to the Information Playground. If you have questions or thoughts about the program, email me, ron@ronbushconsulting.com. Of course, if you have questions about your information security, give an email to me. Check us out on WVLP. It's a great radio station. Check them out if you're local. Be a part of the community with them. They do a lot in the community. Thank you, Larry. Until next time.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you, folks.